Let's come back to something that could assist in streaming that content. The Independent Communications Authority of South Africa has concluded the high-demand radio frequency spectrum auction. ICASA chairperson Dr Keabetswe Modimoeng joins me now. A very good afternoon to you and thanks so much for your time. Please just explain to us what radio frequency spectrum is and why it was being auctioned.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having us and greetings to the viewers. It is indeed a great day for South Africans. The regulator ICASA has successfully concluded the auctioning or licensing of the high-demand radio frequency spectrum. This spectrum, in simple terms, are the raw networks which mobile network operators utilize to deliver connectivity to you and I. It's used for broadcasting services. Viewers are currently watching us from home or anywhere because of spectrum, which is utilized for broadcasting services, but also mobile telephony. The reason why we are able to connect using our cellular phone devices is through spectrum. Now, there are various spectrum bands. There is spectrum which we took on auction, the 700 and 800 bands. Very good for wider coverage, for connecting our people in the outflung rural areas of our country. And the upper bands, the 2600 and the 3500, very good for capacity. These are the bands that are earmarked for your 4G enhancement and 5G rollout. So we are indeed pleased to have conducted for the very first time in the history of South Africa a successful spectrum auction. All the 6 bidding companies participated. They were all happy. There were no glitches. And it is indeed a good day. Consumers should expect to see an improvement in the user experience in the coming few weeks. The clarity of call, the data speeds. And in the medium term, we are now working tirelessly to make regulatory interventions, part of which are obligations in terms of the cost to communicate, the cost of data per megabyte and so forth.
Just explain to us why it took so long for this spectrum to come. I know in your release you said it much anticipated. I thought that was a very generous way of putting something that's been a very long wait and part of the reason that our data costs are so high. And then also just help us understand how the auction process worked.
Yes, no, it took long because it's a contested terrain. When you look in the history of our country, in the mid-90s, just around the time of the dawn of democracy, government gave spectrum frequencies under the old Telecoms Act to your MTN, Vodacom, and at the time there was not stiff competition. Now, 7 years later, there was an introduction of the third network mobile player, SABC, in 2001, also given spectrum to try and introduce competition. But today, as we speak, we had 6 applicants. Now, you understand that we needed to embark on a transparent, competitive process, which has never been embarked upon before, which happened to be an auction. So an auction was conducted so that spectrum can go to whoever needs it the most, whoever is prepared to roll out and live with the inherent obligations, social obligations for that matter, and of course, whoever is then willing to put, the top rents for that particular spectrum. Now, the auction was conducted. We started with a bidder seminar. We then did an opt-in round where we accommodated the relatively smaller operators amongst the 6 so that they could also have a first bite of the cherry. And then we, a day or so later, moved into the main auction where all 6 were now competing toe-to-toe. And I must tell you that the outcome of the auction indeed shows that it was a very competitive, transparent process. All the bidders understood what was expected of them. And we are proud that all 6, Vodacom, MTN, Telkom, Rain, Liquid, and SABC, all 6 managed to grab, something out of this auction, which will be very good for consumers, good for competition, because if there is no competition in the market, that's when you start seeing, various price manipulation, and it's to the detriment of consumers. It is a very good day, South Africans. I cannot overemphasize the significance of this milestone. There has been litigation along the way, and we are in a constitutional democracy. We understand that should a party or anyone be aggrieved, they would then approach a competent court of law. But we then call, now that the auction is over, we are really pleading with all our operators, let us wear our patriotic hat. Let us not try in any way to derail these significant gains for our people. Let us, stay away from contesting the outcome of this auction, which we all were happy with, which we all participated on, so that South Africans can start, seeing the fruits, because this spectrum belongs to the people of South Africa. It does not belong to ICASA. ICASA, we are just, an implementing agent, if I can put it that way. But the spectrum is a scarce resource that belongs to the people of South Africa.
Were smaller players not disadvantaged by the auction? And I'm glad you spoke about the litigation that has come up over the years. If I'm a smaller player, I don't have perhaps the budget of Vodacom or MTN. Does not impact how I was able to participate in terms of the auction?
Yeah, no, we introduced the opt-in round. Like I said at the beginning, the first day was opt-in round. It was only earmarked for the smaller operators because we understood that we needed to accommodate them before we move into the main auction. The opt-in round managed in one day to raise 2.6 billion rands. So those smaller operators are not as small as we may think. They also have big pockets. But the reality of the matter is that globally, this sector, the telecommunication sector, is a capital-intense space. Okay, it is capital-intense. When we introduced the invitation to apply, we opened it to anyone with a network service license. It was not only to the top 6 operators, infrastructure-based players that I have mentioned, but only those applied. In 2021, it was only them who applied, and even now it's only them who applied. And it's not surprising. That is why, from a transformation perspective, we are now focusing, post the auction, on the wireless open access network. That will make or give room to new entrants, more like consortia made of previously disadvantaged groups in our society, to also then come. And Cabinet announced last week that government is looking at the way of enhancing this wireless open access network policy. There will be a public consultation according to the government gazette. We ask all members of the public to make their input so that the outcome of this policy making process and the outcome of our regulatory intervention should actually, illustrate the aspirations of society. So we understand that there are transformation objectives that we need to meet. And contrary to what we've been hearing, a backlash which we thought was really unfortunate, even this current licensing regime is pro-consumer, is pro the public. I mean, on the back of the spectrum auction, there are social obligations, connectivity to police stations, traditional authority offices around the country, government clinics, over 18,000 public schools, and so forth. So it is not only about, the commercial interest of certain previously disadvantaged groups, which we really respect and are working tirelessly to fulfill. But it is about licensing spectrum through an auction, something for the national fiscus, obligations, and improvement of the user experience. Can I work remotely from a rural village in Pitzani in Mahikeng and not have to be in an urban setting of Johannesburg Center to be able to connect? That is the most practical way of bridging the digital divide. So we plead with our public that when public consultation processes are opened, like the one that's coming now for the wireless open access network, let us all participate. We will try and simplify our communications as much as possible so that you understand what it means, how it affects you, and why your input is then sought in that regard.
Dr. Modimoeng, as we wrap up then, you've spoken about the implications of that spectrum auction bridging the digital divide, ensuring that more people across South Africa are connected, and of course data prices falling in terms of more spectrum. When are we going to see that happening practically?
No, very soon. Now that the auction is concluded, we are entering the licensing phase where we can just do the administrative processes. And once the licenses are issued, the obligations will be, in effect. It means operators who bought the spectrum have what we call the right to use, the right to occupy those, airwaves in simple terms. And as with those rights to occupy, the rights to use, comes the right to fulfill the obligations, which include coverage obligations. So I really think in the next coming weeks and a few months, we should start seeing an improvement, because luckily, under the pandemic, we gave away the spectrum provisionally to deal with a surge in demand. So it was like a trial phase. So operators already have got the necessary equipment. We really look forward to South Africans reaping the benefits.
All right, Dr Keabetswe Modimoeng joining us now. Of course, they're expected to raise around 8 billion rand, over 14 billion rand meant for the fiscus raised in that auction. Thanks so much for your time and explaining everything to us there. It's time for a short break. When we